My first guest tonight served in the United States Senate for more than a decade, representing the great state of Pennsylvania. He's also a two-time presidential candidate and a former CNN senior political commentator. In other words, he knows a thing or two about the swamp. He's also a staunch pro-life advocate and a great personal friend, a true conservative. Please welcome Senator Rick Santorum. Senator, it's great having you here.
It's an honor. You got quite a gig here, Governor.
It ain't bad. These people make it a whole lot better, don't they?
This is really something special.
A little different than the CNN control room.
Yeah,
right?
not anything like the CNN control room.
First thing I want to ask you is, and I wanted you to be here for this reason. You served in the Senate, and you understand a lot of terms that get thrown out there. A lot of Americans hear it, may not understand. When people talk about the filibuster, explain what that means and why it's important or why it isn't important.
Well, what people don't realize that up until 1915, in order to pass a bill in the United States Senate, every single senator had to agree.
Everyone?
Everyone. You had to have unanimous consent to vote a bill. When the Constitution changed to have the popular election of senators, senators were elected by the state legislature up until the 17th Amendment in 1915. Then senators had to go home and talk to folks and say, here's what I did for you.
Yeah.
So they got rid of everybody having to agree, and they put something in called a cloture vote, which said that you had to get 2/3 of the senators to agree to end the filibuster, to end someone blocking. So a filibuster was one senator saying, I don't want to vote. And then they said, no, it has to be, you have to have, at least 1/3 of the Senate saying, I don't want to vote. Now it's 60%. But the whole idea of the filibuster was it was put in place by our founders, as was the election of senators by states, to keep the federal government small, to make it hard for legislation to pass. Why? Because if Washington is passing legislation, they are accumulating power.
Yes.
They are not passing legislation to give power to other people.
Another term we hear, the nuclear option. That sounds ominous. I know there are a lot of people that would probably like to see a nuclear option across the Congress sometimes, but what does that mean? Yeah,
that means basically to end the filibuster, to make the Senate, in a sense, like the House, and a majority rules body. One of the things that our founders were most concerned about, because they saw republics in the past, and one of two things happened. Number one, a tyrant took over, and number two, mob rule, which is the majority rules. People think, we live in a democracy. No, we don't. We live in a republic. We don't want a pure democracy. You don't want the passions of the moment changing the law every year or every 2 years or every 4 years. There's something to be said for stability. There's something to be said for a good idea having to sort of, wait its time and make sure that it is a good idea before we actually do something to fundamentally change this country. And that's what the nuclear option is trying to overturn. They're saying it really is a nuclear option because it will destroy.
I think people need to recognize that if the filibuster ends, the minority is basically irrelevant.
Mob rule.
They might as well not even show up.
Yep.
And that means that their voices and all the millions of people they represent are ignored.
Yeah, I mean, again, we forget because we don't take civics classes like we did when we were young, is that our country and our Constitution was set up to protect not the majority.
Yeah.
It was set up to protect minority rights. It was set up to protect people who were not in power. And so all of this, and by the way, the 17th Amendment that called for the popular election of senators, it was done by the progressives of the turn of the last century. Now we have the new progressive movement, which is, again, trying to knock away all of the things that were put in place by our founders to allow our country to maintain our freedom. And the only way to maintain the freedom is to make sure that the majority, the mob, like the French Revolution, think of it that way, doesn't control things.
For quite a few years, you have been a commentator on CNN. They recently decided that they were going to, I love this phrase, they wanted to go a different direction, which meant they said, Rick, your services are no longer needed.
Yeah.
So now the one conservative they had is gone. Their ratings are down 75% since January. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. 75%. I think it was because they got rid of you.
Well, I mean, all I can say is that I was on 3 or 4 nights a week and on all their major coverages up until January.
Yeah.
And after January 6th, I was on the set live while what happened at the Capitol, and from that moment on, I was on twice in 5 months.
Wow.
And I think they certainly, at least to me, they didn't want a conservative holding Joe Biden to account the way I frankly held Donald Trump to account.
Yeah.
Because when Donald Trump did conservative things, I cheered him. When he didn't do conservative things, I didn't cheer him.
Yeah.
And so they like that. They like me being critical, or they didn't like me praising Trump, but I did both. But they didn't want that for Joe Biden. They didn't want to take that chance.
I ran in 2008. You ran in 2012. We both ran in 2016 and were completely annihilated by Donald Trump. But, I really believe that the message that I had in 2008, and I'm not saying this for anything other than I truly believe this, and that you had in 2012, which really was a message about working class people, about the ordinary folks that lifted heavy things, stood on concrete floors all day, came home tired, and didn't get recognized for the hard work they did. I truly believe that we helped to kind of set the stage that gave Donald Trump an opportunity to come in and really clean up and do that job and do it well.
Absolutely. Look, you're an amazing communicator. You're a much better communicator than I am. You're an amazing communicator, and you did a great job in 2008. You did a great job in 12. I carried the water in 12.
Yes, you did.
I wrote this book after the 2012 election. You may remember it was called Blue Collar Conservatism.
Yeah.
And I'll tell a very quick story. I know we don't have much time, but Donald Trump heard me on the radio in 2014. I was on a New York, Joe Piscopo's radio show in New York. And he reached out to me and said, next time in New York, I'd like to see you. So a month or so later, I walked into his office. He's sitting behind his desk, and he's holding a copy of my book, and Blue Collar Conservative. And he says, before I say anything, he says, I read your book. I said, yeah, you didn't read my book.
Yeah.
And he said, no, I read your book. It's a great book. And then we proceeded in the next half hour. Donald Trump went on and talked about, we need someone who stands up for the working man, stands up to China, understands working men and women are not helped by illegal immigration and these waves of immigrants coming in taking their jobs. And, we can't have trade deals that stick it to America and help China. And he went on, and then he said, I'm thinking I got to run for president. And this is what we're going to run on. And then he spent the next half hour talking about how his plane was nicer and how the White House isn't as nice as his house.
That so sounds like
so I left there thinking, well, he ain't going to run for president. He has too good of a gig now, but he did. And he did a great job. God bless him.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
And something that he did that I've always so admired and appreciated about you, and it's something that is very authentic in you, and that is you have been a strong, vocal voice for the unborn, the sanctity of life. And I think if there's no other reason that I absolutely love you and your family, it's because the faithfulness to God in this country that you have exhibited. Rick, it's great having you here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You too, buddy.
Thank you.
You've been great for us.
It is great having Rick Santorum here with us tonight. You can keep up with Rick on Twitter at Rick Santorum, or go to ricksantorum.com for a lot more information. Maybe the book is still in print. You'll find out what Donald Trump enjoyed so much.